background on 5G, give you some technology overview. Hopefully we can teach you a few different things about the technology in general. And then again, we'll show you how we're using it and what products you can expect to see shortly with 5G capabilities. So first and foremost, Peplink's core mission is to deliver unbreakable connectivity anytime, anywhere. And that mission really isn't changing with the onset of 5G. That is still super relevant, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through this. But again, Peplink's core mission is delivering unbreakable connectivity, no matter 5G, 4G, 3G, wireline, wireless. That is our absolute mission. And we feel like we do a pretty good job at it, but it's not really important what we think. What's most important is what our customers think. So we've been covered by Gartner's research for the last 3 years in their WAN edge infrastructure category. And that's great. We're very proud of that. But again, we're most proud of what our customers are saying about our products. And so Gartner in parallel operates their Peer Insights page. And so any Gartner customer, any Peplink customer, any customer using a vendor that Gartner covers is allowed to come to this site, register, and put a review, put a testimonial up about their experience with the particular product and vendor. And so I really am most proud of this. We have excellent ratings on here. Our ratings far outshine a lot of our competition. And so this, I think, is really the biggest testament to what we're able to do in terms of delivering on that mission of unbreakable connectivity. So what are we seeing out there in terms of 5G? Anybody who's got eyeballs and ears can tell 5G is happening, right? There's phones, there's ads, there's all kinds of talk and buzz about 5G. And I think a lot of us have seen some form of a 5G deployment showing up in their area, if not recently, very soon on the way. But up until now, the device availability just hasn't really been that widespread. It's been limited to hotspots and phones. And so we haven't really seen that wave of adoption yet in 5G. It's really just kind of at the beginning still. One question we keep getting is, won't 5G eliminate the need for speed fusion? 5G is fast, right? That's the whole promise. 5G is going to be really fast. And so speed fusion, why would I need that if I've got this super fast 5G? Well, if you've looked at the wireless networks over the years, it's kind of the same story over and over again, right? 3G came out and it's 10 times faster than 2G was. And wow, what are we going to do with all this speed? How are we going to use all this? Same story with 4G. 100 megabits over wireless. Wow, it's going to take forever to saturate that. And so, 5G, we're talking about gigabit speeds, but there's all kinds of new applications that are pent up and ready to be used on these much faster networks. And so I don't think this is going to be dramatically different than the previous generations have. We're good at consuming bandwidth, right? We're great at it. We've demonstrated that over and over again. So I think you're still going to see some of those same challenges develop as people get more and more adjusted to utilizing the capabilities of 5G. The other reason speed fusion is still super relevant with 5G is this is a major transition. It's going to take the carriers a long time to fully develop and deploy 5G in a consistent manner. So that consistency is going to take time. Just geographically, they have to build all this out. And so you're going to see a lot of variations in performance from one area to the next as 5G does roll out. And so those variations in performance are going to drive a need for more control over that experience. And so the great news here is SpeedFusion is 5G ready. SpeedFusion was never designed around one single technology or one single wireless generation. It was always designed to be an adaptable, flexible technology to incorporate different WANs of different technologies and use those in more intelligent ways. So we've been doing a lot of pilot projects with customers and carriers and working on ways that we can make SpeedFusion more relevant and more useful in the 5G world. So some other things that we're seeing out in the market right now, customers are getting really comfortable with LTE and or 5G as a primary WAN. More and more businesses are valuing the agility that comes with those wireless connections, right? Before COVID, even still, retail operations were moving much more to a pop-up type of model where they would be in brick and mortar stores, but maybe only for a short period of time, maybe 6, 12 months. And so the needs of businesses have shifted a lot. And so the capabilities of wireless WANs are really matching up really well with those needs now. But of course, there's always going to be little problems. More and more people are aware of application performance shortcomings. Work from home, all the Zoom meetings, Teams meetings that we're doing now kind of highlight these inconsistencies in wireless networks, right? You might get a good speed test result. You might get 20, 30, 50, 100 megs on your speed test, but somehow you're still getting kind of garbly audio and video on your Zoom call. So what's going on, right? It's just not quite matching up with what people are expecting. The other thing that we're seeing a lot of is, especially in the enterprise, companies are avoiding managing infrastructure themselves. They're really, I think, tired of investing in building networks out themselves, and they're much more interested in building applications and software solutions for themselves. And so more and more we're seeing what's winning out there right now is customers and partners that are able to deliver turnkey, fast deploy solutions. So being able to provide connectivity as a service, smart, unbreakable connectivity as a service is really an area we're seeing a ton of growth in now. So what's the current status? I mean, if you watch the news, if you watch the ads, we've got 5G. It's like wireless fiber everywhere, right? You can do robotic surgery from your couch, and you can have a self-driving vehicle that's going to take you from here to there and bring you home. The possibilities are endless, right? And I don't mean to make fun of it, right? These are real possibilities, but the reality is that's not probably the experience that's possible today. And so what's the difference between people's expectations and the reality out there? Right now, I think a lot of people expect 5G super fast, right? That's what the ads are saying. And so let's flip that switch. I've got 5G in my city. I want to see that hair-bending gigabit, 10 gigabit speed. And for most of us, that's really not going to be the experience that we see today. Instead of a switch, I think the 5G deployment is a lot more like a dimmer. It's not on or off, it's how bright is it right now? How far along is it? So right away, probably a year or two ago, we started to see really limited pilot projects rolling out. A couple cities got a couple deployments, and there were a couple early devices that supported 5G. Now, as those pilots gained traction and proved to be successful, those cities expanded. We started to see some of the flagship Android devices fully support 5G. So we started to get a little bit more maturity, right? It's a little bit more real for people. Now, just a month or so ago, Apple came out with the iPhone 12, and that supports 5G. So now we've got basically all of the flagship and more run-of-the-mill consumer devices supporting 5G. However, that adoption wave hasn't hit yet. The reality is almost everybody on these carrier networks still only has a 4G device. So we've got devices, we've got network, but again, that adoption wave hasn't really hit yet. We're just kind of starting that process where you're going to start to see consumers actually migrating to devices that support 5G in large numbers. So the dimmer's not all the way on yet, right? We're maybe we'll call it halfway there. And so let's look forward to 2021. We're just approaching the end of 2020. And there's been a lot of news lately about routers and things like that supporting 5G, but the reality is those aren't certified yet. The carriers have not certified 5G modules. And so in turn, routers are not certified for these carrier networks yet. So that's really what we're going to start to see in 2021. We're going to start to see these modules get carrier approval, and then in turn, we'll start to see routers and IoT type devices also get approved for these 5G networks. Also in 2021, again, you'll start to see that shift of the consumer devices. Again, right now, pretty much everybody still has a 4G only device. So in 2021, we'll start to see that shift dramatically. Again, these devices are available now. You'll start to see pretty mass adoption of 5G devices. And so you'll start to see the carriers shift their spectrum resources much more heavily into 5G. I think that's a little detail that a lot of people may not be aware of. As the carriers are rolling these networks out, they've got frequencies that they can use in 4G and frequencies that they can use in 5G, and they can kind of share them sometimes too between those two networks. But currently, they haven't really deployed or thrown their full spectrum resources at the 5G networks yet, again, because there's just not a lot of people with devices capable of using them. So you'll start to see 5G get a lot faster in 2021 because, again, they'll shift spectrum resources as people join on with 5G capable devices. 2021 and 2022, you'll start to see mid-band 5G spectrum get deployed. So you'll see an even greater speed boost in 5G as those frequencies are deployed. And we'll talk about these frequencies in a little bit here. And then last but not least is the millimeter wave deployments. Those are already happening. There's probably 30 or 40 cities across the US covered by the different carriers with some degree of millimeter wave coverage. But these are realistically pretty small deployments right now. They're block by block type of urban core coverage areas right now. And so into 2021, 2022, you'll start to see that millimeter wave take shape more and more and really start to enable those super fast gigabit, multi-gigabit speeds that we've all been looking for and waiting for. So let's just talk about how this works, how 4G is different than 5G, and what makes 5G so much faster. And the short answer is there's no single answer to that question. There's a lot of different things in play that together add up to 5G technology's promise and capabilities. On the far left, we've got the spectrum. So at the top, you can see basically today's current swath of LTE spectrum. It's kind of centered around a little bit below 1 gigahertz to a little bit above 3 gigahertz. 5G's opened up a lot of spectrum, so there's just a lot more frequencies that can be used to deliver wireless services to customers. And so we're seeing that shift happen now. We're starting to see the 4G spectrum gradually shift into 5G use, and we're starting to see these new frequency bands start to come alive and be utilized on top of the existing bands that were already in use. So there's really three bands that people talk about. There's millimeter wave. This is super high frequency, super high speed. This is where you get that gigabit, multi-gigabit type of capacity, but it's very short range. It's very easily obstructed by trees, walls, those kinds of things. So it's not really a mobility type of frequency at this point. It's going to take really, really widespread deployment before the millimeter wave frequency is a realistic technology for mobility applications. For the most part, you'll see millimeter wave used in fixed type of applications to start with, or you'll see, stadiums and things like that where there's really high user densities that need all that capacity in one short little area. So millimeter wave is that high frequency, high speed, but again, it's going to take a long time to deploy that in a really ubiquitous manner. Now sub-6, that's below 6 gigahertz. That's kind of usually there's two bands there that are kind of lumped into that sub-6 conversation. And I think the main reason is because the sub-6 frequencies behave a lot like LTE networks do today. You've got basically the same antennas, really similar technologies, really similar ways to deploy it compared to the traditional LTE networks. But that sub-6 kind of mid-band slice, there's still a lot of new spectrum there. It behaves pretty similar to existing LTE networks. So that's an area where, again, you'll start to see a lot of early gains in the speed as those mid-bands come online. It's just giving you more channels to talk out on that 5G network with. Now that sub-6, that sub-1 gigahertz low band, those are what carriers often call coverage bands. Those are the bands that can reach really far in rural areas and penetrate deep into buildings. So 5G on this spectrum is great because, again, it provides you that wide coverage, but it's really kind of an incremental improvement in terms of speed. Those low frequencies, there's not a ton more you can do with them. So there's technologies here in the middle to make that spectrum more efficient. You've got massive MIMO, so you've got 4x4 or even more MIMO, so you can hear a little bit farther, you can talk a little bit farther, and you get a little bit more cleaner usage of the airtime. But again, that's an incremental gain. Beamforming is kind of part of that. That again helps the antennas just talk more efficiently back and forth to each other and focus their energy at the tower, at the client, which yields better data rates. But again, that's a more of an incremental improvement in speed versus a game changer. And there's some underlying technology that just makes the encoding and kind of the technical ways that these towers and devices talk to each other a little bit more efficient as well. 5G is also a lot more efficient and flexible. So you can have really big channels and really small channels. So you can have really small channels for IoT devices and kind of keep them segregated, give them much longer range, but not kind of crowd the higher capacity, higher throughput bands for other devices. So carriers are going to have a lot more flexibility and control over how they chop this spectrum up and how they utilize it. Another big attribute of the 5G networks, again, especially with the millimeter wave networks, is densification. Those millimeter waves are, city block level coverage. It's not, hundreds of feet, it's hundreds of feet. It's not thousands of feet or miles, or it's much smaller footprint. So there's a lot more nodes required to provide that kind of ground level coverage. So oftentimes you'll see the carriers activate 5G again on their lower frequencies right away. So they don't have to deploy new towers necessarily to do that. They might have to tweak something at this tower or that tower to turn that on, but relatively light lift in terms of effort required to turn that on compared to getting bucket trucks out there and hanging poles on streetlights all over your city blocks to get that super high speed millimeter wave deployed. So how can we use speed fusion with 5G? What are some useful ways that these two technologies can fit together? First up, bandwidth bonding. So 5G is going to be a faster connection. That's kind of the underlying promise there. And again, really the reality in a lot of scenarios. Comparing the same situation from 4G to 5G, 5G is generally going to be faster every time. But again, as these networks roll out, you're going to have very wide variations in the performance you're able to get. If you're in the urban core, you might see those gigabit speeds or maybe several hundred megabits as you move out to the more suburban areas. And then as you get into the rural areas, oftentimes you'll still see 5G performance maybe in that 20, 30, 40 megabit per second range. And so that sounds kind of like 4G speeds, right? And again, those low frequency bands on 5G are really more of an incremental improvement. They're not game changer type of speeds yet. So as especially in mobility applications, as you're moving in and out of these areas, you're going to have widely varying capabilities from those LTE networks. So that ability to do packet level bonding and aggregating throughput is still going to be really important, especially in mobility applications. Now, when we talk about hot failover, again, as you're moving between these networks and jumping up and down that ladder of capability and speeds, you're going to have dead spots too, right? 5G does not just eliminate dead spots magically. The carriers still have to put in a ton of effort and resources to cover all these areas efficiently. And so there's still going to be gaps, right? One network is still going to be stronger here than the other network is. And so being able to seamlessly hand off between those networks is still going to be super relevant, again, especially in mobility applications. Now, if we look at fixed applications, you might be able to use a much faster, more consistent 5G connection in a fixed location, all right? You might be able to get access to that millimeter wave or just maintain really high speed, 100 megabit plus type of connectivity. And so in those situations, you might want to use 5G as a primary WAN, or you might want to use it as a backup to like a high quality landline, right? Backing up a high quality landline, if you've got like a gigabit connection and rolling that over to maybe a 10 or 20 megabit LTE connection, that's not going to give you a great experience, right? If you've got 50, 100 users on that wireline connection, that single LTE connection really isn't going to give them that same experience. It's not really a useful failover in a lot of situations. So being able to switch over from a high-speed wireline to a high-speed 5G, that's still super useful, right? You can match that experience of that wireline connection and give you that seamless failover between the two. Two other speed fusion technologies we can talk about with 5G are WAN smoothing and bandwidth overflow. So WAN smoothing, the whole point of WAN smoothing is to optimize the performance of real-time applications. WAN smoothing is not targeted at peak throughput. Again, your Zoom call, your Teams call, they don't care if you've got a gigabit connection. They need like 1 megabit really consistently. They need super low packet loss. They need super low latency. Again, it's all about the consistency that makes those real-time applications perform well. And so WAN smoothing, you can do that. You can optimize that. You can make sure that you've got the most consistent usage on every single packet that goes out so that you can adjust to those variations in one link or another. Again, 5G networks are going to have a ton of capacity, but there's still going to be little interruptions, right? The latency is going to be super low overall on these 5G networks, but there's still going to be little performance hiccups here and there as people do heavier and heavier applications on them. So you're still going to see that need for protecting those real-time applications. Now, bandwidth overflow is something we haven't talked a lot about publicly yet, but this is a really great fit for 5G and especially fixed location type applications. Oftentimes, fixed location, they already have some sort of wired connectivity, and that's usually an unmetered, kind of unlimited type of connection. But oftentimes they've kind of maxed that out, right? If it's a DSL connection or a cable connection, it's got its limits, right? Maybe you've got a 50 meg DSL connection. That does pretty well for the most part, right? You can do pretty much everything you need to, but more and more, as we're doing more and more Zoom calls, more and more online applications, maybe that 50 meg just is kind of getting maxed out. Well, with SpeedFusion bandwidth overflow, you can still use that wireline circuit as your primary link, but then you can burst traffic onto a wireless link or any link for that matter. So you can have that unlimited, always on wireline connection. And again, as your users are demanding more and more bandwidth that go beyond the capacity of that single link, you can burst onto that wireless link. And so you're optimizing your costs, you're optimizing your usage, but you're still giving yourself that flexibility to have a higher speed experience. So 5G has been talked about for a couple of years now, several years actually. And so it's been a little bit frustrating, I think, for a lot of people, right? We keep talking about 5G, we keep hearing about it, but the reality is I still can't have it in my ambulance, or I still can't have it in whatever application I'm trying to do. Maybe it's an autonomous car, right? We're still kind of stuck using 4G in a lot of cases. But the really good news is this has given us time to prepare as a vendor, right? So in 2017, we already knew 5G was coming. And so we launched our EPX with modular capabilities so that we could upgrade that router down the road as 5G and other technologies became available. So we took that same thought process from our EPX into our MBX and our SDX. As we deployed more and more high quality products out there, we made sure that we had that upgrade path covered for those types of products so that they're really a long-term investment versus kind of a 1 or 2 year kind of consumer cycle type product. Again, we wanted to give customers that investment protection as 5G matured and became closer and closer to reality. So now again, 2020, those modules started to become available. We were able to get our hands on modules, get into labs, start testing those modules. And then later in Q2, Q3, we actually been able to carry out many pilot projects with our global partners and carriers, so we can see in the real world how these things behave on the 5G networks. And so again, we're approaching that point where these modules are going to be carrier certified, and then the routers will be carrier certified. And so depending on your country, depending on your carrier, we are now accepting orders for these devices. And again, for the US, the carriers aren't quite ready to accept these devices. So, it's not something you can buy right now and start rolling out, but you can get first in line to get these devices as they do go through that approval process. And in other countries, it might be a lot easier to get these rolled out on your carrier networks right now. So you need to talk to your account manager at Peplink to figure out what's available in your area, what the pricing is on that. And we'll show you in a little bit what options are available to start pre-ordering. So we talked a little bit about kind of the roadmap and where 5G is right now, but just to kind of recap, right now, especially in the US, we're seeing 5G really widespread on those sub-6 frequencies. All three major carriers have pretty large footprints on those sub-6 frequencies. We're also seeing simultaneous deployment of millimeter wave from those carriers. Again, in the US, I think the major carriers each have about 30 or so cities that they've got some level of millimeter wave coverage in. That's not citywide in most cases, I don't believe. But again, you're starting to see this pop up more and more in the urban areas. So globally, there's a pretty wide adoption of 5G, but also quite a bit different focus from some carriers to the others. So I think the US and China are probably the furthest along, maybe South Korea as well. And you're starting to see Europe and Latin America and some of these other territories start to embrace the technology as well. So we're really starting to see that momentum shift where almost everybody's got this deployed in some manner now, and it's really not a matter of turning it on, but improving it at this point. So we've talked a lot about technology in the market, but let's look at what Peplink is going to be making available for 5G devices. So we've got 6 devices here that are 5G ready. We've got our MBX. This is our really powerhouse mobility router. You can use this in a fixed location too if you're trying to get a whole bunch of bandwidth aggregated into one location. But again, a lot of times we see this in a mobile context. We've got our balanced 310 5G. This is a dual radio 5G and 4G router. We've got our PDX. This is a rapid deploy tactical solution. So all the antennas, everything needed, all built into one kit that you can throw out anywhere that you need super fast connectivity. Then on the bottom half, we've got our more enterprise focused models. We've got our SDX Pro, which is a new product we just came out with. It's got 2 modular slots, so you could have 5G and fiber or whatever mix of technologies you need in there. We've got our SDX, which is similar to that SDX Pro, but just 1 modular bay instead of 2. And then again, we've got the EPX, our absolute powerhouse. This is often deployed in fixed and mobile locations as well. I know mobile health imagery, mammography, those are applications where we've actually seen this product deployed in mobile scenarios as well. So let's take a deeper look at each of these. So the MBX 5G, this is almost identical to the current MBX. There's really no change other than the radio tray that's put on there. So again, the MBX, when it launched, was an upgradable product from day one. There's 4 screws that allow you to remove that radio tray. So you just unscrew those 4 screws if you've got one already, pull that radio tray out. You can buy a 5G radio tray, plug it back in. Now you're on 5G. The MBX is really, again, the ultimate mobile connectivity solution. There's PoE on it, there's USB, there's Ethernet WAN. So if you've got satellite or microwave or other types of links, you've got 2 different Wi-Fi radios, so you can have Wi-Fi WAN and a Wi-Fi access point. You've got lots of capabilities built into this router. And again, you've got 4 cellular connections, whether it be 4G or 5G, that you can use to aggregate bandwidth or protect real-time applications using those different speed fusion technologies. The other really cool thing about MBX is you're not only diversifying and giving yourself redundancy on the carrier side, you're also really targeting uptime from a power side too. The MBX has 2 different DC power inputs as well as a DC terminal block. So you've got 2 different plugs you can plug power supplies into, and you've got a terminal block to hardwire it. So you can mix and match those, right? You can run the DC barrel jack connector off of a AC to DC inverter, and then you can directly hardwire the DC jack and use the ignition sense to wire it directly to the vehicle's battery. So you've got lots of power options that you can use to keep this router up and make sure that you're staying up no matter what out in the field. So let's look at some ways people could use this. Again, this doesn't have to be a mobility product. You could use this at a fixed location where you just need really good failover connectivity, right? Again, you might have 1 or 2 gigabit lines coming in over Ethernet or fiber. And again, you need a useful failover connection so you can bond a couple 5Gs together to give you that super useful failover. Again, you've got PoE output on this device, so you can hang some cameras or access points. The other cool thing you can do with the MBX is if you're really using a lot of bandwidth out in the field, we've got a product called our SIM injector. And so this allows you to plug this device into the MBX and add even more SIM cards to your connectivity mix. So by default, the MBX comes with 4 modems with each 2 SIMs, an A and a B SIM for each modem. So that's 8 SIMs total in the traditional MBX deployment form factor, but you can add these SIM injectors to add 8 more SIM cards at a time. So again, if you're consuming massive amounts of bandwidth out in the field and chewing through data plans faster than you can keep track of, you can use that SIM injector to make sure that you're always using the most affordable connectivity instead of paying for overage rates. Again, there's lots of different possibilities. If we look at a mobile deployment, again, you can use 5G, you can use LTE, you can use VSAT, you can use Wi-Fi from maybe a port or a hotspot, or maybe it's just a depot that you're parking your fleet vehicles in. You've got lots of connectivity options on the MBX. Again, you can run things like IP cameras, access points, any sort of PoE device with that built-in 8-port switch with PoE, 802.3AT PoE output on it. And you can hang more switches off it, whether it's a Peplink switch or a third-party standards compliant switch. You can expand the connectivity from that MBX. Next up is the Balance 310 5G. This is a new model. So it's real similar to the current 310X or the 310 that you remember from the wireline only configuration, but this has 2 embedded cellular radios. We've got one embedded 5G radio and one embedded 4G radio. So you've got the ability to connect to a 5G network and a 4G network simultaneously. So you can diversify your carrier mix and make sure you've got the coverage and the speed you need, no matter what. And then you've got that wireline connectivity as well. So this is a great enterprise branch router. Again, whether you're trying to use 5G as the primary link or as a high quality failover, this Balance 310 5G is going to be a really nice fit for those types of fixed location applications where you're trying to get that wireless connectivity and into that fixed location. Again, there's all kinds of applications you can use with this. So you've got the full stack of SpeedFusion technologies to protect, your point of sale transactions, your voice over IP phones, any application you want. You can customize and steer your traffic appropriately to those different SpeedFusion profiles. So you can make sure that Zoom calls get protected with WAN smoothing, and you can make sure that your point of sale applications have that nice hot failover experience between the primary and the backup links. You don't have to use just one SpeedFusion mode. You can mix and match and use traffic steering to intelligently protect and optimize traffic. Next up is our PDX 5G. Again, this is a mobile powerhouse. You've got 5G connectivity, you've got PoE, you've got AC power input, DC power input. There's optional batteries, so you can mix and match your power inputs. You can transition from DC to battery to AC and back again without the router going down, without any interruption in connectivity. So you can get this thing rolled out anywhere you need it, and then you can move it anytime you need to without having to interrupt that connectivity. That whole top tray has a huge antenna array in it. So you've got really high quality antenna connectivity built right into that box. You don't have to mess with, you don't have to put tripods up or do anything to get this thing connected. You just have to push that power button down, let it boot up, and you're ready to go. On the top, there's a patch panel. So you can map out WAN ports or LAN ports to those external Ethernet ports so that you can, maybe you've got a fixed line connection at the location you're at. So you can map out a WAN port to those external ports using that patch panel. Or maybe you need to hang up cameras or access points around your perimeter, and you can map out those PoE LAN ports to those external ports. So you can close the lid, let this thing run in the rain, do whatever, right? This is a hardened, ruggedized device ready to go wherever you need that connectivity. On the left, there's 3 bays you can see, so you can populate those bays with optional batteries. Or we've got a kit to put our SpeedFusion engine, that tiny little cube-shaped router in there. So if you need special frequencies or other radio technologies, you can add more and more connections to this using those optional bays on the left. And of course, you've got nice OLED status displays. So you've got one dedicated to the power, and then you've got one dedicated to the router, so that even a non-technical user on site can identify any problems that might be going on with this and provide helpful feedback to a remote technician, so you don't have to deploy IT staff with this product. And again, the uses for this are all over the place. Large events, if you've ever had a conference at a hotel or an event center, you probably know internet connectivity at those types of locations usually starts in the thousands of dollars and moves up to the tens and even hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's a lot of money for what usually is kind of crappy connectivity when it comes down to it, if you've ever used the Wi-Fi at any of these events. So events are obviously a great place where you could use this device, and you'd be able to actually save a lot of money using this device even at those events. Public safety is another real common use case for this type of product. You never know where you're going to need to go day to day for some of these first responders. And so having as many connections as possible in one box and a ready to go form factor is really, really well suited for those public safety critical application type of scenarios. Again, it might be a mobile command scenario where you're setting up a staging area where you've got lots of different people from lots of different jurisdictions coming in, and you might need phones and devices like that to get commanders connected and communicating. And you might have a lot of different systems that also need connectivity. So the PDX is a great fit to get you up and running as fast as possible with connectivity as fast as possible. Now, for all of you that have our Flex module capable routers, we will be launching 5G capable modules for those routers. So again, we launched the EPX in 2017 with this in mind, right? We knew 5G was going to be a requirement for those types of products. So anybody who's deployed these since 2017 can upgrade them to 5G. So the 5G Flex module will have two 5G connections in it. Again, 5G has a lot more antenna connections, so we've got 2 radios in there instead of 3, as opposed to the lower category LTE configurations we used to see. And again, these have redundant SIM slots. So for each 5G radio, you can put 2 SIM cards in there, total of 4 SIM cards across one module. And if you've got a router that supports multiple bays, you can add 2, 4, 6, however many radios you need to that modular platform. So this will be, again, a really easy way to get up and running on 5G if you've got one of these modular routers already. So here's our SDX Pro, again, a new version that supports these Flex modules. This one's got 2. So again, you could let's get 2 5G connections, and let's get the SFP Plus for some gigabit or 10 gigabit fiber connectivity in there. Now we've got 2 awesome different technologies all combined into this one router for whatever application we need. If you need more LTE, cool. You can put 4 5G connections in here and utilize those 2 slots. So that covers the current 5G lineup for today. There's definitely more in store as the year changes over here. We've got a lot more platforms in development that'll help give you even more 5G connectivity options. But again, that's what we've got for today. So I'll open the floor for questions. I see we've got a couple teed up here. I'll just review those and start answering those. Feel free to drop those into the Q&A section. Okay, first one is just kind of a housekeeping item. I should have said this at the beginning, but nonetheless, we are recording this webinar. So if you registered and didn't get a chance to join right away, or you missed something, had to jump out early, it will be posted on the forum probably by tomorrow. Every webinar we do, we post on the forum. So go ahead and take a look over on the forum. There's a huge backlog of content out there for you to look at. And again, this webinar will also show up there as well. Okay, I see a question about 5G at sea. So this is an interesting one. And we've got an in-house maritime expert, Sam Norris, who maybe could speak one better on this than I can, but I'll give it a shot from my perspective, at least. 5G at sea, there's often not a huge user density out away from the coast. And so I think you'll see, the low band and the mid band frequencies targeted at the coastal regions. The millimeter wave, there'll definitely be coverage right at shore, but that won't carry out very far into sea. So again, I think that sub-6 spectrum is really where you're going to see a lot of, at least initial focus for the maritime applications with 5G. So I see one question on the SIM injector. How is it connected to an external antenna? It's not. So the SIM injector is an interesting device. It's unique to Peplink. So we're able to take that SIM injector and basically transport those SIM cards over the Ethernet line up to the radio. So we've got software and hardware capabilities built into our product to allow that radio to remotely select different SIM cards from that SIM injector or directly inserted SIM cards on the radio itself. So you don't have to have any sort of antenna connection to that SIM injector. You just have to have an Ethernet path from that SIM injector to wherever the radio is. So it gives you a lot more flexibility to change SIM cards out. If your radio is in a hard to reach location, you can locate that SIM injector in an easy to reach location and swap your SIM cards out that way. I see another question. Is your 5G modem Cat 18 or something different? So the products that we were showing you today are all available in Category 18, but Category 18 is just gigabit LTE. It's not 5G. Some vendors have called it 5GE or some sort of kind of spin on the fact that it is faster than traditional LTE, but again, Category 18 is not real LTE, so that's not what we were talking about on any of these products here. Those products, again, we have Cat 18 versions of them, but everything we showed you today is something that we are launching with a real 5G NR capable radio inside of it. And so those 5G products support actually all of the 4G bands as well. So they're 5G capable, but also able to shift down to 4G connectivity. But again, Nick, that's a different model, Cat 18 versus the 5G models that we showed today. What will the cost of the Balance 310 5G be? You'll have to reach out to your account manager there. I don't have an answer that I can share on the webinar today, but I think you'll find that's actually a pretty reasonably priced product for an enterprise deployment. I think that's one thing important to talk about too. Another question we get all the time is, what about the BR1 Mini? When's that going to be 5G? Well, the BR1 Mini is a $300 or less product. And these 5G modules right now are not cheap. So, it's not going to be possible to deliver that low cost of a product in a 5G form factor today. But we have some new platforms and new efforts in development that'll really help us drive the cost of 5G down. So again, the first wave will really be targeted at enterprise and mobility applications, but in the not too distant future, you'll start to see those costs and price points shift downward into the more mainstream type applications as well. I see another question about the SIM injector. Does it work? Does it just work off the radios in the main device? Will it work with other devices like the HD4? The SIM injector, again, requires hardware and software compatibility. So it's not going to work with all of our products, but it will work with a lot of them. The MBX and the HD1, HD2 domes are both examples of products that support that SIM injector capability. I believe our UBR products as well support that capability, but it is a model-to-model compatibility. So you'll want to double check with your account manager if you need to use that on a particular product and find out which ones are exactly capable of that. I see a question that I think I addressed here. Can you confirm that these will be backwards compatible? And so yes, the 5G modules we're using are backwards compatible with 4G. And so you can connect to 5G and 4G simultaneously, even in some scenarios. But yes, if 5G isn't available on your carrier, but 4G is, these modules can scale back and connect to the 4G networks. Another question on the PDX, does it have omnidirectional antennas? Yes, that whole top lid is filled with an omnidirectional antenna array. And so you can lay it on its side, lay it flat, and still get nice smooth coverage from those antennas. I see a couple questions on the Balance 20X. Will that be able to support 5G? And the answer is probably a maybe there. There's some speed limitations on that. I've put a post up in the partner forum. So if you're a Peplink partner, go check that out and share your thoughts on the 20X and what you think is reasonable there. I see a question, is it possible to upgrade a Max HD2 router? So if your router doesn't have the modular capability in it, like our X series products do, the answer, unfortunately, is no to that those products with the embedded modems aren't really field upgradable. So another question, will Will there be a single antenna that can cover the full 5G spectrum, or do we need to have an array to get the range between sub 1 gigahertz and the millimeter wave? So this is a really good question, and I should have touched on this earlier. Sub 6, I mentioned, is basically the same kind of technology as LTE today in terms of the antennas and in terms of how the signal propagates. It's very similar to the 4G world. A sub 6 5G router requires 4 antenna connections, just like the Category 18 LTE radios do. So that's that 4x4 MIMO. But the millimeter wave technology is dramatically different. Millimeter wave modules require the antenna to be manufactured by Qualcomm, and they require the antenna to be just a few inches from that radio. And in terms of manufacturing, there's a lot of calibration. There's just a lot more complexity with the millimeter wave technology. And so, really the initial push on 5G for the mobility space is going to be in the sub 6. And again, that's the easiest 5G connectivity to deploy in terms of that antenna connection as well. So you'll start to see more external radio products for 5G coming out with the millimeter wave capability. Again, if you think about our HD-WAN, HD2 dome, that's a great example of where we would probably deploy the millimeter wave technology. And you need that radio and antenna coupled right together so that you can get that connectivity right where the signal is. Again, that millimeter wave isn't going to go inside your building, inside your IT closet. So you're going to need to put that antenna outside in an area that's going to get really clear line of sight to that 5G millimeter wave node. So again, you'll see the 5G millimeter wave stuff start to take shape much more in 2021. The first push will really be on the sub 6 frequencies. I see a question on NA versus NSA, or SA versus NSA mode. Yes, our modules support both. That's a super technical detail that does matter. But if you don't know what it is, I wouldn't worry too much about it. But short answer is yes, we support both SA and NSA. Are there any restrictions to use these products in the US? Yes, the carriers have not certified any modules for 5G for routers yet. So you can use them either in a pilot form factor if you're working with a carrier. Otherwise, they're not really allowed yet by the carriers. So there's some more formalities that need to take place there. But again, none of these 5G modules for routers have been certified by the carriers in the US yet. So there's a little bit more work to be done before that's ready. See a question about the Transit Duo. Will there be similar models like that with 5G capabilities? Again, early next year, we'll have some more platforms that are able to deliver 5G in different form factors, different price points. So certainly there's things on our roadmap to enable 5G connectivity in all sorts of form factors. That's not something right away today, but again, early next year, we'll start to be able to share more information on those types of devices as well. A lot of questions on cost. You got to reach out to your account manager for that. Just let them know which model you're interested in. If it's an upgrade option or a new product you're looking for, just reach out to your Peplink account manager or distributor, and we'll get those questions rolled up to the accounts team and answered. What antenna array is the PDX using? It's a custom designed solution. That's about as much as I can say there, but it's not something we bought off the market. It's specifically designed for the PDX. Question about the Puma antennas. So another great question. Our Puma antennas are great fit for sub 6 5G. They cover all the way from 600 megahertz up to 6 gigahertz. So there's a huge section of spectrum that those cover. So they're a great fit for these 5G routers. Again, the LTE coverage on those different models, the spectrum coverage is the same. So any of those Puma antennas are going to be a great choice as long as you've got the right number of leads. So like the Puma 401 would be a great 5G capable antenna for that sub 6 spectrum. If you don't know who your account manager is, reach out to the place that you purchased it from. They bought it from a distributor, and they'll be able to kind of link the chain up to our account management team and get you that pricing information. So your point of purchase is the best place to reach out to. They may not have the information on hand themselves, but they will relay that request up and we'll get you the information you need. I see a question about health risks of using 5G. What's my opinion on this? Well, I don't think 5G causes COVID. First of all, I'll just address that one right out of the gate. I think some of us have seen those maps that kind of mash up 5G deployment with COVID cases, and they're around population centers. I don't think 5G causes COVID, but more seriously, does 5G cause some sort of cancers or other sorts of things? I really haven't seen a lot of change in the research on this over the years, right? That this has been well researched over many years for cellular technologies in general. And, putting really loud radios next to your head is not a great idea in general, but these devices are very, very low powered. We're talking way less than 1 watt in most cases. So I haven't seen anything compelling that says 5G is dramatically different from a health perspective. So I see a few questions on like product availability. We've got these modules in hand right now. We've got live pilot projects going on with customers in lots of different countries. So if you've got something really hot and you've got carrier approval or that's possible, then that's something very likely you could get right now if you really had something real to use these for. So again, reach out to your point of purchase and or account manager, and we'll have a discussion about that and see what's realistic given your carrier and your geography. All right, folks, we've got 4 minutes left here. I'm going to give you that time back. Really appreciate all the participation and everybody's time here today. Thanks again. My name's Travis Durick, so feel free to reach out on the forum, and again, look to the forum for updates on this recording and other 5G information.